Thank you. That will be my friends. Thanks for coming. So, last year at this event, I gave a talk on the psychology of Carnism. Essentially, today I'm going to recap what I talked about last year, but then ultimately I'm leading into my thesis, which I just conducted as part of my master's degree, which is on the psychology of veganism, and I'm going to pick out aspects of that and mainly talk about vegaphobia, vegansexuality, and cognitive dissonance in the vegan movement. If you're interested in any of the psychology stuff related to meat eating that I'm talking about, I can provide you with my speech and everything. You'll be able to get hold of my email, and I'm happy to send you anything that you want. So, not here to talk about myself, but I just thought I'd tell you about me, because of why am I here? Why am I talking to you about this? Well, for the last 14 years, I've worked in animal care, wildlife rehab. I worked in rhino conservation. I did a bit of teaching and animal management. I'm now an ecologist, and I do have a background in animal rights. So my undergraduate degree was animal health and welfare, and as I said, I've just completed a master's degree in Anthrozoology, and that's the study of the psychology of human-animal interactions and relationships. So last year I discussed how and why the majority of the population are not vegan. As a vegan, it can be really hard to understand or accept why people don't hear about what goes on and not instantly transition towards veganism, and that they're happy to keep consuming the products that comes from animal farming. But the truth is the majority of meat consumers are not happy about the system, and they don't feel comfortable about what they're doing. And this discomfort causes them to act in a way that might seem quite irrational or perhaps even shocking towards some of us when we hear the reactions from meat consumers when they're confronted. And I'm sure most of you, if not all of you in this room, have heard the term cognitive dissonance. And that is the state that is induced in people when their beliefs conflict with their actions and they're reminded of that. So, cognitive dissonance occurs when a person is forced to confront the fact that their actions do not align with their beliefs. And this happens in quite a few areas. It's not just related to meat consumption. So, for example, somebody who's trying to lose weight and they really want to lose weight and they're always talking about it, they're reminded that last night they ate an entire packet of Oreos. That might have been me. But they're induced into a state of cognitive dissonance, so they instantly come up with essentially excuses as to why they did it to try and make themselves feel better and excuse their behaviour. In relation to meat consumption, cognitive dissonance actually has its own term. It's called the meat paradox. So we induce the meat paradox in meat consumers when we talk to them about veganism. When somebody is induced into a state of dissonance, they attempt to reduce the negative feeling by offering justifications for their actions. For example, I went to the gym a lot last week, and I also ate salad for 3 days, so if I want to eat a packet of Oreos, then I will, and it's fine. I don't need to explain myself to you, as we hear quite a lot. Then it's meat paradox. So, all of the justifications presented by meat consumers, we've probably all heard quite a bit. So, if we don't eat meat, we will die. That is a big one that I hear all of the time. Or we need dairy for strong bones. Of course we do. And cows will take over the world. We can hope. All of the justifications presented by meat consumers tend to fall into 3 categories. So this was the majority of what my talk was about last year. I discussed these categories in depth. There is a 4th one, which is dissipation through change, and that's going vegan. That's the only way you can really rid yourself of most of the dissonance that you're suffering from. So when we understand these categories and how people respond to their meat paradox, we can actually use this to essentially manipulate the psychology of meat consumers to get them to transition towards veganism. This is the area of psychology I'm interested in, because I'm convinced one day we could have psychologists who people go to because they want to be vegan, but they can't do it, and we'll essentially manipulate them into it. So ritual are the hardest people to get to go vegan. These people, it can be vocal or physical, the rituals that they're doing, because what they're doing tends to be based on a faith or a belief, and not something that can be disproven or proven to them. Whereas separation, you can bridge the gap between animals and food and between us and animals by showing them footage of slaughter and things like that. And objectification tend to be science-based and science-minded. If you're interested in any of this, I can send you everything that I talked about last year. What's important to note, however, is that people presenting these ideas and justifications aren't inherently cruel or evil. They don't hate animals, they're not even deliberately ignorant. They're a product of mass indoctrination. I came up with the cult of Carnism, which people don't like, but I love it. They are a product of mass indoctrination. They have spent their entire lives being indoctrinated into a cult of Carnism by people that they know and people that they trust. It could be parents, schools, doctors, or friendly, weird-looking clowns. Why wouldn't you trust them? It's been your whole life. Everyone's been telling you all the time. Of course they think that we need meat for protein. Of course they think that if we don't milk cows, they're going to explode. That's just what they've been told forever. Why would they listen to you, some random person who's just approached them to tell you that's not true? The system that they've been influenced by has a lot of money and a lot of power, and that's what we're fighting against. It's also important to realise how our lifestyle choices impact on us as members of a society. So we are social animals. Some of us are really awkward about it, but we are really social animals. We want to be liked, we want to fit in, we don't want to stand out. And due to the cult of Carnism and due to something called vegaphobia, being vegan is negatively socially marked. People don't really like vegans. I'm sure we've all experienced vegaphobia to some extent, and that's what my thesis was about, some of it. Studying the psychology of meat consumers for a year of my life and giving a talk about it last year led me into a greater understanding of how people transition towards veganism. But in my talk last year at the end, someone said to me, well, you know all of this about meat consumers and their psychology. What do you know about the psychology of vegans? And I thought, well, nothing. So that was where my thesis was born from. My studies led me to further questions. I won't go through them all. I did look at some of these. I had to cut it all down in the end. I was meant to write 8,000 words. I wrote 30,000 words, and I had to cut all of it out, and it broke my heart. But I'm going to be publishing a lot over the next couple of years with my tutor. So if you're interested in anything, you can have it. On the 7th of January this year, I put together an online survey to which over 1,000 vegans responded. And that's absolutely incredible because some of you in this room might have done my survey and you weren't even aware that you did it. It went on Vegan UK and all of these big groups. With the similar studies that I was looking at towards mine got anywhere from 17 to 300 respondents. So when I had over 1,000 come through, it was just incredible. I didn't expect anything like it. Thank you to anybody who completed my survey. Demographics weren't anything too crazy. I'm going to publish about them, especially the LGBTQ plus aspect of it, because I found that really interesting. But in summary, 69%, no, that is not right, 83% were women, 95% were Caucasian, and 80.5% are under 46 years old. Young, white women. That is the main demographics for vegans. I'm sure we're not too surprised about that. 69% are not religious. What I found really interesting about this, again, I won't go into it, I don't have time, but is 4 of the 1,000 people identified their religion as vegan. So I looked into this. Is veganism a religion? It turns out it actually could be classed as a religion. Again, I don't have time to talk about it. If you're interested, it will be available. We've got a Satanist as well, so shout out to the Satanist. And 18 people didn't specify, but are religious, so I don't know what they are, but who knows. It's their business. Right. 70% are heterosexual. I found this really interesting because I have found this in my personal experiences as well. The vegan movement has a higher than average population of LGBTQ plus individuals. So the general population, according to the Office of National Statistics, is 93.2% heterosexual, and we are 70.52%. I've done my best to explain it in the paper I'm publishing, but I find it really interesting anyway. The main career paths for vegans: creative arts and or social care. Although I stupidly didn't put in the option for students, so we have like nearly a 20% other at the bottom. I assume these people may be students or in education. As to be expected, around 60% are either left, far left, or anarchist. Not particularly surprising. Again, not going to talk about it. We got some far-right vegans in there. Met one today, actually. That was interesting. So, veganism is a personal and social identity. A total of 88.73% of respondents either agreed or strongly agreed that veganism is a large part of their identity and of who they are, and it means a lot to them. This correlates with previous research that demonstrated that living a meat-free lifestyle plays a large role in shaping an individual's identity. It's shown that being vegan can cause changes in social circles over time, with individuals increasing the time that they spend with other vegans and moving away from their meat-consuming friends. These factors could explain why long-term vegans identify more strongly with the vegan identity, which was something I found. So the longer you're vegan, the more that veganism means to you. Women were significantly more likely to disagree that they socialise with other vegans. This could be related to the fact that men tend to build friendships based on mutual activities and are often less accepting of new group members, whereas women are more compromising in social aspects of their lives. So it could be that vegan women tend to have larger social circles with more diverse types of personalities, whereas men gravitate towards those who are similar to themselves, including veganism. Vegaphobia is a term used to describe the prejudice often presented against vegans within society. It was termed in 2011 by two researchers. Generally, people who abstain from consuming meat or that hold animal rights worldviews are often viewed quite negatively by society. Interviews and online surveys with vegetarians or vegans have shown that the lifestyle and diet can actually put quite a strain on our personal and professional relationships and can lead to microaggressions and mocking and intense questioning and things like that. And due to these negative social attitudes, some vegans actually report avoiding telling people that they're vegan, and they don't want people to find out that they're vegan, and so they just hide it from people. These reactions are linked back to the cognitive dissonance that I was talking about earlier. By pretending that there is something inherently wrong with a vegan, you can almost justify your reason not to go vegan. Why would I want to be one of them? They're preachy, they're rude. Some are. In my study, 32.8% of respondents either agreed or strongly agreed that they avoid using the word vegan in social situations because they are worried about negative reactions. I found this really interesting because there was a study we done before mine where 31% agreed that they are vegan, but they don't identify themselves as being vegan. But that study didn't ask them why. So I asked them the same question, not the same people, but I asked the same question, and I asked, is it because you're worried about people's reactions? And I got 32%, which is very close to 31%. So I think we can maybe suggest that the people in the previous study, that might be the reason they avoid it. Furthermore, 52.51% claimed that they've suffered from prejudice or discrimination for being vegan, and 55.4% said they often encounter rudeness and hostility from people when they say that they're vegan. This perceived vegaphobia could explain why some vegans hide their vegan identity from people. Studies demonstrate that someone's gender often predicts how their food choices are evaluated by others, with vegan men being subjected to more biased and increased social avoidance than vegan women. The link between meat and perceived masculinity is heavily studied. There is so much research out there from South Africa to America, everywhere, that men tend to not as likely to go vegan as women, and because meat is masculine, that's how it's seen. So this led to a hypothesis of mine that women or men would be more likely to receive vegaphobia, rudeness and hostility and prejudice, and more likely to hide their vegan identity. However, my study actually found no link between gender and perceived vegaphobia, but did identify a link between gender and respondents hiding their vegan identity. Contrary to what I thought, men were actually more likely to disagree that they hide their vegan identity when compared to women. So essentially men tend to be more vocal about the fact that they're vegan. This could potentially be explained by research that has shown that women are more socially anxious than men, particularly when it comes to receiving criticism. So they just hide it because they don't want to receive any criticism. There were two researchers, however, in 2017. I came across this bit of research I found really interesting. It says that men, like modern vegan men, are now adapting their behaviours to lessen the likelihood of receiving vegaphobia. There's actually a new term that's come out in the last couple of years called hegans. And these are men that focus heavily, even if they're vegan for animals, they focus heavily on the health aspects of it and talk about health quite a lot, and they maintain the societally accepted perceived masculinity, as it were. So they're coming across as still being very masculine and promoting themselves as masculine whilst also promoting veganism, and they seem to get a lot less hate. And so these hegans might be sort of driving the male vegan movement forward. My study also linked age to vegaphobia, finding that younger ages, we're talking 18 to mid-20s, report higher levels of vegaphobia than those over 30, but I didn't have room to get them to elaborate on the type of vegaphobia that they're receiving. I kind of assuming that younger people spend a lot more time online on things like Twitter and Facebook. It could just be that they're getting negative comments there, so they're receiving vegaphobia maybe on a daily basis if they're commenting on vegan things, and older people might not be doing that. This is an area of research that me and my tutor are looking into. Vegansexuality, I found this so interesting. This was the bit I was excited about doing. I myself identify as vegansexual. So this is a vegan who could not imagine dating or forming a relationship with somebody that wasn't vegan. So it is described as the practice among some vegans of having sex or pursuing romantic relationships only with other vegans. Nearly 40% of respondents said that if they were single or seeking a new relationship, they would only date another vegan. men were more likely to be vegan sexual than women. I found this interesting because the only thing that's been done before, there's been no research on it before, but there's been online discussions. I've looked at forums and boards and things like that, and it tends to be heavily populated by women. And it seems to be women that talk about being vegan sexual quite a lot. But actually, I found statistical significance that shows that men are more likely to be vegan sexual. And cognitive dissonance. So, cognitive dissonance was my main area of interest to begin with. I was looking at meat consumers and the cognitive dissonance that they suffer from. And then I went to work in South Africa for a little bit, and I worked in rhino conservation. And I was induced into my own dissonance when I was there for quite a while, because I was talking to the rhino owners, and they were talking about animal rights and vegans and how much they hate us and how many problems we give them. And I said, but you're saving rhinos, why would vegans hate you? You're fantastic. And they talked to me about the rhino horn trade. And I left South Africa being very pro-horn trade. The only way we are going to save rhinos in the next 10 years is if we start farming rhino horn. And then I came back to the UK and I started talking to vegans about this, and I was just met with intense dissonance, intense mocking, questioning. I was kicked out of vegan groups on Facebook, and I understand it because that's how I felt at first. This led me to be like, oh, okay, there's actually loads of cognitive dissonance in the vegan movement, and essentially what we're doing is denying science and denying facts because we don't like it and it upsets us and it hurts our feelings. So that led me into this sort of interest area. So I looked at quite a few areas to begin with and had to cut them out because, as I said, I had so many words in my thesis. I was looking at all sorts of areas from antinatalism all the way through to feeding companion animals meat. That seems to be quite a common subject that comes up. The ones I focused on in the end are these. So, feeding meat to companion animals whilst being an animal rights activist. So maybe you go to slaughterhouses and you protest against animal slaughter, and then you go home and you feed meat to your cat. Well, that induces cognitive dissonance in those people. Using medicines that have been tested on animals. So we might go and protest against animal testing, and then we take regular medications, which we wouldn't have if we weren't testing on animals. I think about this every time I take my animals to the vets. Every time one of my animals has an operation, I think, how many rats died so that my rat could have this operation? Is that fair? Using or consuming products made by companies that also sell non-vegan products. I find that this splits people down the middle, but also we're all guilty of it. So maybe us here today would say, well, I'd never go to McDonald's, I'd never buy anything from McDonald's, that's horrific. But then we'd probably go to Subway, or we all bought that sausage roll from Greg's, didn't we? We all went to Greg's and bought the sausage roll. I've eaten like 10, but I'm like, oh no, I won't go to McDonald's. We go to Tesco's. Tesco's own slaughterhouses. So we're looking at that in vegans as well. And using and wearing items purchased prior to going vegan, which is called preganism. So people own pregan items, could be leather or wool or makeup or anything. So as I said, there were other areas I tested, but I just cut them out. I just had to choose. This is part of my questionnaire that I had. As we know, cognitive dissonance is induced in individuals when inconsistencies occur between their beliefs and their behaviors. It can be assumed that I induced dissonance. I'm sorry if you took my survey, because you probably got mad. I had so many inboxes of people after they completed my survey because they wanted to justify their answers to me. And that's because they'd been induced into cognitive dissonance. So they felt that and they were like, oh my God, I've said this, but actually I feel like this. And I had loads of inboxes of people telling me why they gave the answers they did. It was completely anonymous. I don't know who answered what. I don't know what my friends answered. I did it because I wanted people to be honest. So sorry you didn't get a reply because I was just really busy that day. So, this is just an example of one of the questions. I would ask someone, do you own a pet that eats meat? And they think, oh yeah, I do, so they put that. And then they go down, and there I put a statement that makes them feel very guilty. I put, consider that feeding domestic animals meat products means that another animal must be killed. And instantly, they've gone, oh my God, I've just said yes. And now I'm guilty of killing this other animal. And then what I did is gave them an opportunity to justify why they did that. And I really found cognitive dissonance in the vegan community across the board on every question, without doubt, statistical significance. So if you answered yes, that you feed your pet animal meat, it is statistically significantly likely that you also answered strongly agree to all of these justifications. It is acceptable to feed domestic animals meat-based pet foods when it is a byproduct of the meat industry, or because they are naturally carnivorous, or because vegan pet foods are expensive. I was looking at finance, I was looking at ethics, I was looking at everything. This falls under something called the compliance paradigm. There's different ways of inducing dissonance in people, and I went with that one. I felt it was most appropriate. So So here's another one, and in this one I put the dots to give the examples of it. Do you still use or wear animal-based products that you got before you went vegan? People put yes, and then I said, consider that using these products promotes the use of animals, and then they went, oh shit, and suddenly they put strongly agree to everything. Essentially, I confronted respondents with the awful things that they're taking part in and then gave them ways out of it and see if they took it, and they took it. When considering the use of animal testing medications, however, I found an anomaly. I found that people that don't take regular medications were more likely to strongly agree that it is only acceptable to use medications when there is no alternative option. And that was the only anomaly out of all my questions. And I had in my survey almost 100 questions. And I wanted to explain this, like why did I find this? And I believe it was my fault, it was in my wording of the question. So I've highlighted it there only. So if you take medications, you're not likely to agree with that, because I've said it's only acceptable to take them if there's no alternative options. And people would go, well, no, I take medications for this reason. Whereas if you don't take them, you'd be like, yeah, okay, there's no alternative option. That was the wording of my question, that's what I believe anyway. That was my anomaly. Makes me very sad. Due to the nature of ethical veganism, it can be assumed that all of respondents in my survey don't actually agree with the actions that they're taking. For example, the respondents are likely to disagree with utilising the meat industry or animal testing and things like that. So what I found isn't that vegans are okay with these practices. What I found is they're often willing to compromise their deontological worldviews. So animal rights, you'll generally get people go, no compromise, animal rights all the way. That's deontology. It's this ethical idea that every animal has an intrinsic right and is worth as much as the other. So when I take my rat to the vets because he needs an operation, I'm not being deontological, because why does my rat's life mean more than the rats who died in labs? So I was, this like, I'm deontologist, I'm extreme, I'm animal rights, I'm really radical. And then actually one day I was like, well, I'm not. I compromise on a lot of areas of my life. And then I criticize other vegans for compromising on areas of their life. And I stopped. Although vegan consumers acknowledge that they're funding ethically questionable companies, arguments for purchasing the products were included, and it's, make products convenient. More people will go vegan. So if Greggs want to bring out a vegan sausage roll, great. Like, buy the sausage roll, it builds up the demand for products. But you are funding a company that kills animals. Throwing away pre-gan items, that's a big one. I know a lot of people are environmental, so some people are vegan for environmental reasons, so they don't want to throw all of their leather away or things like that. I understand it, it's fine. Nobody's right and nobody's wrong, so there's no point in arguing with people about this. Everyone's got their own reasons and their own justifications. Right, am I going to do this next bit? I will do it. Whatever your feelings are on these issues, just know that there are areas of your lifestyle whereby you will be internally conflicted. One of my favourite things to discuss with vegans, and I'm not here to preach about it at all, I'm not here to preach to you about antinatalism, but it's one of my favourite things ever. It's about breeding more humans. So, you have kids, you want kids, great, go have kids. But did you know that even if your child somehow stays vegan throughout their entire life, they are still going to produce 73 times the emissions of someone that goes vegan would reduce. So every human that exists causes habitat loss, and every human that exists causes pollution and the suffering of animals in some way. Again, I'm really not trying to target people that have kids. It's great, I love kids. But what I'm trying to do is show you that nobody's holier than thou. Nobody's better than the rest. Which one of you gets to decide that because you brought something from McDonald's that was vegan, they're worse than you when maybe you have 3 children? I feel really bad about this. I wasn't going to do it. But I'm just trying to show you that we all have cognitive dissonance in some way. It's just part of life. We're just humans. It happens. My future research that I'm working on at the moment, very slowly, looking at various things. Demographics discussion, so discussing things I talked about with the demographics I found. Vegan motivations and aversions, I've already got all the data, this was in my questionnaire. Political identity, found that really interesting, about right-wing vegans, why they go vegan, and why they're much, much, much more likely to go back to eating meat. The most common types of vegaphobia experienced by vegan demographics, tactics that are used to reduce dissonance. So those 3 categories I talked about earlier in meat consumers, I want to categorise vegan dissonance as well. So I'm going to do that. If that research gets published by any of you, I'll know about it. Whether vegan dissonance reduction techniques can be categorised in the same way that meat consumers can, that is what I just said. Now you know twice. So, this is my acknowledgements, my thesis that I just handed in. I just wanted to end by saying, it says, with great thanks to Mary and Richard for their contribution to this paper, and to Irene Wood, my mummy, for all her supporting my choices all the way through. She's so amazing, but she's not here, so. And then it says at the bottom, I would also like to thank all of the vegans of this world who continuously speak up for animals, even in the face of extreme opposition, in the face of vegaphobia. People are still out there on the streets. You've got hunt saboteurs, Reading hunt saboteurs, if you haven't been to their store, go and see them. You've got them out in the field nearly every week, fighting fox hunters and saving animals. So everyone, no matter what we're experiencing, even though over 50% of us are experiencing aggression, we still go out there and we still speak for animals. That's who I wrote this thesis for. Thank you for coming. And sorry that I talk really fast. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, you said that you've noticed a trend that there's the LGBT community is overrepresented in vegan circles.
Yep.
And I don't think you said much about why that is. Could you share some insights into that?
Yeah, sure. So what I've found is intersectionality is growing within the vegan movement. And actually intersectionality, if you look back on historical movements, social justice movements of any kind, it's important for the growth and success of any movement. And intersectionality is where we align ourselves with other social justice movements. We promote each other and we guide each other and we help each other. And what I've found is that I think members of the LGBTQ plus community know what it's like to be oppressed, and they understand suffering more than heterosexual people because they've experienced it throughout their lives. So I think that they maybe have more empathy towards animals and what they're going through because of their own experiences. So that is something that I've written a bit about and I will be publishing. And again, I think I'd put my email up if anybody is interested in it. I'm happy to send you everything that I've done on it. But that's the answer that we've sort of come up with. I ran it by my tutor as well, and before I told them what I came up with, he seemed to come up with the same thing essentially. So it's just to do with intersectionality and the link between oppressions and understanding the oppression of other beings. Thank you very much.